A few days ago, I received a letter that has stayed with me ever since. The letter contained some of the deepest struggles of a person who goes through the process of inner work. As I read his letter, I realized this wasn't just one person's struggle. It was something I think many sincere seekers carry quietly within themselves, often without ever speaking about it. I dedicate this video to him and all individuals who might find themselves in his letter. This video is for those with integrity who are painfully honest with themselves and relentlessly choose truth over the illusion of comfortable lies. He wrote that for many years he had been sharing a teaching that had profoundly changed his own life, but over time, something began to trouble him. He shared quite a few experiences, but one sentence in particular stopped me. He said, "I feel as though I have been speaking from the memory of something I once lived, rather than from something I am living now." I read that sentence several times because it felt painfully honest. It is one thing to doubt what you know, but it is something entirely different to question whether you are still living what you know. There is a kind of suffering that only appears when conscience becomes more important than reputation, and when you would rather become silent than continue speaking words that no longer feel alive inside you. As I sat with his letter, I realized I wasn't really thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about all the people who have devoted themselves to an inner life long enough to reach this strange and difficult place. A place where yesterday's understanding no longer feels sufficient, yet today's understanding has not fully arrived. I don't think this experience is talked about nearly enough. We hear people speak about awakening. We hear stories of transformation, insight, and profound realization. But very few people talk about what happens when the excitement fades, when certainty becomes quieter, and when you begin asking yourself a question that cannot be answered by another book or another teacher. Am I still living what I once discovered? I have a feeling that if this question has ever visited you, then this conversation may matter, because I no longer believe it is a sign that something has gone wrong. In fact, I have begun to wonder whether this is one of the most important moments on the path. If you've spent enough years on an inner path, you may eventually notice something that no one really prepares you for. The struggles do not disappear. In some ways, they become more subtle. At the beginning of the journey, our attention is usually drawn outward. We notice the world, we notice the confusion around us, we notice the ways other people deceive themselves. We read books that seem to explain everything we have sensed, but could never put into words. Every new insight feels like another light being switched on inside us. Then, almost without realizing it, something begins to change. The light that was once directed toward the world slowly turns back upon ourselves. We begin to notice the movements within us that we had overlooked for years. We see how easily fear disguises itself as wisdom. We see how often vanity borrows the language of humility. Even our wish to help others is no longer as simple as we once believed. Hidden within it, we sometimes discover the quiet desire to be appreciated, to be needed, or to be seen as someone who understands. These discoveries are rarely dramatic. They are often deeply uncomfortable. There is a reason Gurdjieff spoke so often about self-observation. It must be because it gradually dismantles the comforting stories we tell about who we are. It asks us to look without rushing to defend ourselves, justify ourselves, or condemn ourselves. It simply asks us to see. I sometimes think this is where the real loneliness of the inner work begins, not because we are physically alone, but because there are moments when no one else can look for us. No teacher can observe our reactions. No book can reveal our hidden motives. That responsibility quietly becomes our own. And something curious happens when a person continues in this way for years. The more honestly they observe themselves, the more difficult it becomes to pretend, not only before others, before themselves. Perhaps this is why the letter affected me so deeply. I didn't hear the words of a man who had given up. I heard someone whose conscience had become too awake to accept an easy answer. He could no longer ignore the difference between remembering an experience and living from it. I suspect that many of the people who appear strongest on the outside carry this struggle in silence. They continue speaking, teaching, working, and smiling, while privately wondering whether they are still standing on living ground or only on the memory of where they once stood. If that question has ever found its way into your own heart, I don't think it is something to fear. I think it deserves to be listened to. Because sometimes the most uncomfortable questions are also the most honest ones, and an honest question can take us much further than a comfortable answer. There is another possibility that I have been thinking about ever since I read that letter. What if the deepest crisis on the spiritual path is not that we lose the truth, but that we slowly begin to identify ourselves with having known it? That is a difficult thought to accept because spiritual identity rarely looks like ordinary pride. It doesn't boast. In fact, it often wears the face of humility. It whispers, "You should know better than this." It says, after all these years, you shouldn't still struggle with anger, fear, vanity, or distraction. It quietly convinces us that the length of our journey should have placed us somewhere beyond our ordinary humanity. And when reality refuses to cooperate with that image, something inside us begins to fracture. This is why so many sincere people become so hard on themselves. They are not trying to be admired, they are trying to be real. But somewhere along the way, they begin measuring themselves against an image they never consciously chose to create. The image of someone who has progressed, someone who understands, someone who should be living at a higher level than everyone else. The tragedy is that this image can become so subtle that we mistake it for conscience. Real conscience simply shows us what is. It does not humiliate us. It does not compare today's awareness with yesterday's experiences. It does not tell us that because we have seen something beautiful once, we are now condemned whenever we fail to live up to it. As I reflected on the letter, I found myself wondering whether the pain he described came from losing something or from refusing to continue protecting an image that had quietly formed over many years. There is an enormous difference between those two things. One is a loss, the other is a liberation, even if it feels like grief at first. Life has a way of removing every place where we try to find psychological security, even the places that seem noble. It does not matter whether we build our identity around success, knowledge, kindness, or spirituality. If we cling to any of them, sooner or later, life asks us a question we cannot answer with ideas alone. Who are you without this? That question can leave us standing in unfamiliar territory. It certainly doesn't feel like progress. It feels like standing with empty hands. But empty hands are exactly what this kind of work requires. Nothing new can enter while we are still holding so tightly to who we believe ourselves to be. And perhaps this is why his words touched me so deeply. He was not asking how to recover an old experience. He was asking, without quite saying it, how to remain faithful to truth when the image of himself could no longer carry him. I think that is one of the most honest questions a human being can ask. The sentence that stayed with me more than any other was this: I feel as though I have been speaking from the memory of something I once lived, rather than from something I am living now. I have returned to those words many times over the past few days. The more I sat with them, the more I realized they describe a danger that is easy to overlook. Memory is a gift. Without it, we would lose the lessons life has patiently taught us. We remember the people who changed us, the moments that opened our eyes, and the quiet discoveries that altered the direction of our lives. Memory preserves those moments with extraordinary care. But memory also has another side. It can quietly persuade us that remembering an experience is the same as remaining connected to it. I don't think they are the same. Most people who have walked an inner path for any length of time can remember moments that seem to change everything. Perhaps it was a brief experience of self-remembering. It could be a moment when the endless noise inside became strangely quiet. Probably it lasted only a few seconds, yet those few seconds divided life into a before and an after. Those moments are precious. They remind us that another quality of consciousness is possible, but they cannot be lived on forever. No sunrise, however beautiful, can illuminate the whole day. Yet the mind has a habit of turning those moments into a destination. Instead of allowing them to point us toward a different way of living, we begin trying to return to them. We compare today with yesterday. We compare the ordinary moment before us with a memory that has become brighter each time we revisit it. Without noticing it, we stop meeting life as it is. We begin measuring life against what it once felt like. I have caught myself doing this more than once. There have been periods when I looked back and quietly thought, something was more alive back then. At first, I believed I was simply being honest. Later, I began to wonder whether I was no longer seeing the present at all. My attention had become occupied with recovering something that could never be recovered because life never repeats itself. This is one of the quiet lessons hidden within the inner work. Self-remembering is never an invitation to remember yesterday. It is always an invitation to awaken now. The present moment never asks us to bring yesterday's clarity with us. It only asks whether we are here enough to receive what is being offered today. That is much harder than it sounds. There are days when the present feels empty compared to what we remember. There are days when nothing extraordinary happens. We sit, we observe, we forget ourselves, we remember again, we become identified, we notice it. The inner work appears almost ordinary. That is exactly where many people become discouraged. They mistake the absence of extraordinary experiences for the absence of growth, but maybe the deepest changes are not the ones that overwhelm us. Maybe they are the ones that quietly reshape the way we meet an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, an uncomfortable conversation, or a moment when no one is watching. It is easy to recognize a great experience. It is much harder to recognize a quieter consciousness. That is why we so often believe we have lost something, when in reality, life is simply inviting us to stop chasing what once was and begin seeing what has always been here. As I continued reflecting on his letter, I found myself returning to one question. What if this painful season is not interrupting the inner work? What if it is the inner work? That thought changed something in me. We often imagine that real progress should feel like moving from darkness into light, from confusion into certainty, from struggle into peace. We naturally expect the path to become clearer as we continue walking it. But life rarely unfolds that way. There are moments when understanding grows, and there are moments when understanding seems to dissolve. There are days when everything feels connected, and there are days when you cannot even recognize the person who experienced those moments of clarity in the first place. We resist those days because we think they have no value. We call them failure and mark them as losing our way, but perhaps they are asking something that certainty never could. They are asking us to remain present without leaning on yesterday's understanding. I think that is one of the hardest things a human being can do. It is surprisingly easy to remain devoted when your inner life feels rich and alive. It is much harder when nothing seems to confirm that you are moving at all. In those moments, there is a temptation to manufacture certainty, to repeat ideas that once felt true, or to convince yourself that everything is exactly as it used to be. But the man who wrote to me chose something much more difficult. He chose honesty. He chose to admit that he could no longer confuse memory with direct experience. The more I thought about that, the more respect I felt for him. Not because he had reached some extraordinary realization, but because he refused to betray his own conscience. The world often rewards people who always have an answer. We admire confidence. We admire certainty. We admire those who speak without hesitation. Yet some of the wisest people I have met carry their understanding very quietly. They are careful with their words because they know how easily words can become substitutes for seeing. There is a humility that comes from knowing the difference. That is why silence has always occupied such an important place in the inner traditions. Silence is not simply the absence of speech. Sometimes silence is the refusal to say more than you truly know. Silence is what remains after an illusion has fallen away. It is conscience protecting something sacred from becoming another idea. When I finished reading the letter, I didn't feel that I had witnessed someone abandoning the path. I felt that I had witnessed someone refusing to abandon the truth. Sometimes the path asks us to keep speaking. Sometimes it asks us to become quiet. The difficult part is that no book, no teacher, and no philosophy can make that decision for us. At some point, each of us has to stand before our own conscience and listen. And perhaps that quiet listening itself is an act of self-remembering. When I finished reading his letter, I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected: gratitude. Most of us wait until we have resolved our doubts before we speak about them. We tell the polished version of our story. We share the lesson after we've already made sense of it. Very few people are willing to say, "I don't know where I am right now." So if the person who wrote this letter happens to be watching, I simply want to say thank you. Thank you for trusting me with something so personal. Thank you for allowing me to share the heart of your letter with others. I have a feeling your honesty will reach people in ways neither of us can fully measure. Your letter also reminded me of something I often forget. When I first became interested in spirituality and philosophy, I was almost completely alone. I didn't have people around me who wanted to talk about these things. I still don't, at least not in my everyday life. Most of my questions, my doubts, and my moments of discovery have been lived quietly, with no one nearby who understood why they mattered so much. When I started this channel, I wasn't trying to become a teacher. I was simply sharing what I was discovering as I went. I never imagined that people from different parts of the world, people I will probably never meet, would write to me about experiences they had carried silently for years. Over time, I realized this channel had become something I never planned. Not a place where one person gives answers, a place where people recognize themselves in one another. Perhaps that is why your letter affected me so deeply. It reminded me that beneath all the different languages, countries, beliefs, and traditions, there are human experiences that quietly unite us. The fear of deceiving ourselves, the longing to live honestly, and the ache of feeling distant from something we once knew with certainty. All of these unite us as seekers of truth. If you are still listening to this and something in this conversation has felt familiar, I hope you will be gentle with yourself. There may be seasons when everything inside you feels alive, and there may be seasons when all you can see are your own contradictions. There will be days when attention comes naturally, and there will be days when you forget yourself 100 times before lunch. That does not necessarily mean you are moving backwards. It may simply mean you are becoming more capable of seeing, and that is enough for today. Don't try to become the person you were 5 years ago. Don't chase an experience that changed your life. Don't measure this moment against another one that exists only in memory. Meet this moment as it is. If it feels quiet, let it be quiet. If it feels uncertain, let it be uncertain. If all you can honestly see today is your own confusion, then let that seeing be your work. There is a strange peace that comes when we stop demanding that life confirm our ideas about where we should be. We become available to what is actually here instead of mourning what seems to have disappeared. I have a feeling that this quiet availability is far closer to real transformation than we often realize. The path does not vanish when we can no longer feel it. Perhaps it simply becomes too subtle to be found by memory and can only be discovered again through attention. Thank you for listening.